There are few English traditions more rooted in the national consciousness than celebrating St. George. Every year, for more than 6 centuries, we have been celebrating the heroic celestial knight and his struggle against the dragon as part of our national folklore. But what has this to do with Lord Elgin and his famous marbles? Stay with me to find out, just after the intro. Hi, I'm Mario Trabucco, and this is Marble Games, the channel dedicated to the Elgin marbles and their broader cultural context. When talking about Elgin marbles, one of the elements I put much emphasis on is how their presence in the British Museum has been instrumental in creating so many works of British and most generally Western art. Since the very moment they started to be displayed in Britain in 1807, the marbles have inspired painters and sculptors, poets and writers to produce some of their best work. In some cases, this influence is more apparent, as in the case of Lawrence Alma-Tadema, Salvador Dalí, Henri Matisse, or Auguste Rodin. In other cases, it is more subtle, with echoes of the sculptures reverberating in everyday life objects such as a chess piece or a coin. Our story starts here, at number 27 St James Place, the location of the grand London home of the Earls Spencer. Here, Lavinia Countess Spencer, a strong-willed woman of great erudition and charm, in the words of historian Malcolm Lester, met one day in 1817 a young and promising Italian engraver called Benedetto Pistrucci. Pistrucci was born in Rome in 1783 and quickly made a name for himself as one of the great cameo carvers and gem engravers of his time. After moving to London in 1816, he continued his work here, enjoying high-level commissions and even royal patronage. When Countess Spencer decided to commission a cameo to celebrate the fresh appointment of her husband to the Order of the Garter, Pistrucci was the logical choice. Sir Joseph Banks, the president of the Royal Society, introduced the two, and Pistrucci recalls in his autobiography that Lady Spencer showed him a large model in wax of a St. George, which had been produced by the Royal Academician Nathaniel Marchant. Pistrucci was to make a similar model, but it was to be, according to Lady Spencer's expressed desire, in the Greek style. The Greek style was all the rage in Regency England, and Pistrucci, according to those who knew him well, liked to study Greek originals day and night. And one group of Greek originals stood front and center in the inspirational lookbook available to London artists then, the Elgin marbles. Since the very first moments in 1807, when the marbles were made available for inspection to artists and antiquarians, the sculptures became an object of pilgrimage. Even before they were acquired by the British nation with Act of Parliament in 1816, artists such as Haydon, Flaxman, West, and many others were admitted to Lord Elgin's house in Park Lane, where they would draw them for weeks together, in the words of another renowned sculptor of the time, Joseph Nollekens. This was exactly the reason why Lord Elgin had brought them to Britain in the first place, for the improvement of the arts and to be of public utility, to use his own words. After the purchase by the British Museum, their accessibility grew exponentially, and their influence and reception increased accordingly. From the great high art to decorative art, one way or another, the Elgin marbles were everywhere. But let's go back to St. George and our Italian engraver. Pistrucci's design was a thing of beauty, imbued with the elegance of the classical models. St. George, usually depicted as a medieval knight, becomes a classical hero, riding naked a horse and charging head-on towards his enemy, his sword at the ready and his mantle floating in the wind behind him. The dispenser must have been impressed, no doubt. And she wasn't the only one. Pistrucci's boss at the time, the Master of the Royal Mint William Wesley Pole, was right in the process of selecting fresh ideas for a new series of coins, part of a much-needed reminting operation to stabilize the British currency landscape after the Napoleonic Wars. Wesley Pole charged Pistrucci with producing the design for a new gold coin, the sovereign, using an adapted version of his cameo. The new coin was introduced to replace the £1 banknotes issued during the war with France, and the design was to be marked, in his words, by perfect form and exquisite taste. The coin, designed by Benedetto Pistrucci with inspiration from the Elgin marbles, was so successful that his model is used to this very day, in a virtually unbroken succession of almost identical emissions spanning more than 2 centuries and accompanying the effigies of 8 British monarchs. There is a pause in the use of this design during the last years of George IV and part of the reign of Queen Victoria, but overall this is a remarkable continuity. The derivation from the Spencer cameo is evident, but there are also some minor differences. On the new sovereign coin, St. George no longer holds a sword, but what remains of a spear after he struck the dragon. The whole design is surrounded by the garter belt, inscribed with the royal motto Honi soit qui mal y pense. After 1821, the belt was removed, and the spear changed back into the original Greek sword. This is the design that we appreciate even today. After the Battle of Waterloo, Pistrucci was given another task, designing a commemorative medal to be struck in gold and offered to the monarchs and military commanders of the Allied powers, Britain, Prussia, Austria and Russia. Pistrucci once again used classical models and let himself be inspired by the Elgin marbles, coming up with an intricate design featuring the 4 monarchs wearing togas and laurel wreaths on the obverse. On the reverse of the medal, we see Wellington and Blucher, portrayed in a familiar cavalcade of obvious Parthenonic derivation, with Nike, the goddess of victory, floating beside them. Zeus rides his chariot above, satisfied that order has been restored. This very complex design required innovations in the minting technique, and Pistrucci did not finish his models until 1849. By which time all the intended recipients, with the exception of the Duke of Wellington, were already dead. The medal was never struck in gold, but a limited number of proofs were produced in wax, gutta-percha, and as electrotypes like this example in the British Museum's collection. Despite all the misadventures, Pistrucci's mastery survives in a few examples in museums and private collections, allowing us to appreciate today not just his obvious skills, but also the clear depth of inspiration his designs owed to the Elgin marbles. That's all for today, but tune in for another episode of Marble Games.